Hey guys, in this video we're going to be checking out the new NECA Toys Aliens Carter J. Burke and Xenomorph Warrior. Alright, so let's get some dimensions going now. Before we start and I measure off these figures, I just have to tell you, I am cheating a little bit. Carter here does not come with a stand. I'm making use of a display stand because of a concern I'm really having with the figure. I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to take the measurement from obviously the point where his feet start. Carter is about 7 inches in height. Then we have a look at the Xenomorph Warrior, and the Xenomorph at about full standing is about 8, I want to say about 8 1/4 to 8.5 inches in height. Accessories to come included with both the two figures. We have Hadley's Hope sign, like a little backdrop here. It says, "Have a nice day, population 158. It's got some really nice wash to it, giving a slight age to it, kind of giving a slight rusted look to it. And you see that there's some shredded areas of metal around it. Yeah, it is completely finished on both sides, actually more rusted on the back side, and you can see it has support stands, so you can actually have it standing behind the figures. One of the other things that the card that actually comes with the package does actually give you a backdrop, something that you could have had on display behind the figures, such as this. The only downside, though, is it's paper. Well, to be clear, it's actually a gloss paper, so it obviously has no stability to it whatsoever. Could have made it from a thicker cardboard. As you can see, there's the back of it right there. Something that you could have actually had it properly stand. As a solution that they could have also done, too, is given a track, a plastic track, with maybe a couple of just little supports on the sides, something like that could have tabbed and held this up, because this is such a great backdrop scene. Then you incorporate, of course, the Hadley's Hope sign in front of it. It looks good, but unfortunately you can't really do anything with this. I might maybe consider if you displayed this, say, on a shelf. A shelf wouldn't so much be the problem, because you could just easily have it against the back, the back wall or back board of the shelf and just display your figures in front of it. But if you wanted to free stand this, obviously it's a little bit more trickier when you're using just gloss paper. So something that they could have easily, I think, changed and fixed. As mentioned, it already has mentioned the Hadley's Hope accessory. That's all that comes with these two figures. I mentioned that this particular figure didn't come with a display stand. It does not come with a stand. I just made use of that because, unfortunately, Carter Burke, as much as I have waited for a polarizer figure, unfortunately this figure has the worst time standing. Let me just show you exactly what's happening here. His feet are on what seems to be permanent angle. I thought, okay, let's just adjust the feet, getting it out of packaging. Let's just loosen up those joints and get them to sit flat. Unfortunately, though, Carter doesn't seem to have the ability to have flat feet. If you straighten out his legs, you see his feet are on an angle. And then the cuff sculpt of the top of his, or at least the bottom part of his pants, prevent any sort of allowing the feet to go further up than what they're basically doing right now. The end result is it pushes the figure back, and a lot of times you'll see that the figure will just topple over. I ultimately had to then cheat and make use of a display stand so I could actually get the figure to stand properly. And I'll just peg him into place. That's how I'm unfortunately going to have to display the figure. I can't seem to get him to stand any bit better than what I've tried to do. The feet can, like I said, go up and down. Let me just show you here. That's as much as they can do. You can also get them to rotate, but having them any further up, unfortunately, is not accomplished. Peg holes on the undersides of the feet, thank goodness for that. If they didn't have peg holes on the undersides of the feet, I don't know what I would have done. But here we have Carter J. Burke, played by one polarizer. When these were initially announced on Twitter. I did actually, I did follow up the Twitter with a comment that I wish that NECA could have actually released a Helen Hunt from the movie Twister. Then I could have actually recreated the cast of Mad About You. I'm sure everybody's like, Mad About, why would you bring up Mad About You? I did enjoy it. It was one of my favorite comedies in the 90s, was Mad About You. Mad About You and Seinfeld. But I think here we have a really good representation of Paul Reiser. I could only imagine, being that there's not many Paul Reiser figures on the market, that he probably would have scooped this guy up and have him on display. Imagine having your own figure on display in your house. It must be a somewhat eerie sort of experience, being able to walk by a plastic representation of yourself. From a standpoint of a sculpt, I think they've nailed it. It does look like Burke, and thereby it also looks like Paul Reiser, right down to his very curly hair. Paul Reiser had a very, very short-lived show that very much harked, almost a mirror copy to Curb Your Enthusiasm. It was canceled immediately. I think it survived two episodes. And since then, Paul Reiser can also be seen in the second season of Stranger Things, which really is great for me because I really liked Paul Reiser. But again, like the face, I think is really good. The eyes are good. He's got the open mouth expression, of course, that he's spotted said Xenomorph warrior that we're going to look at in a second. Again, you got the partially open mouth, a little bit of red been painted in there as well, and you got the lower teeth visible. No upper teeth, but at least the lower teeth are visible. Definitely does look very much like him. Comes with a jacket, which I suppose in theory could be removed. I don't know why you would need to remove it, but underneath that he's got a plaid shirt, and he's got himself a pair of almost navy dark blue pants. Also a sporting watch on the one hand. On the other hand, absolutely nothing. Unfortunately, his hands have a permanent curve to them. As good as this figure is on sculpt, unfortunately it suffers a bit from the sculpt destroying some posability. As much as the feet can't pose further up, thereby eliminating, in what I can see, a way to properly display the figure just standing on his own. Unfortunately, his arms are the same problem. His arms are slightly on a curved bend. You do have the bend forward on the arms, but to bring the elbows any further bit back, you always have this slight curve that's always going to be there. You can't really bring them any further back because of the sculpt of the sleeve is further past the point of the elbow articulation. There's the back of the figure. Again, really like the sculpt of the vest. The pants look good. I got no issues with the pants whatsoever. You know what you could also do, perhaps not quite, but this size of the figure, you could have almost swapped this out for the Nightmare on Elm Street Jackie Earle Haley Freddy Krueger as an articulated lower half. I'm sure they could also make use of this lower half for other articulated figures, maybe in the near future. It is definitely a shorter leg. It seems like a shorter leg than the Robert Englund Freddy Krueger figures. But again, something they could make use of this, I'm sure, for future figures. Posability on this guy. Head rotates all the way around. Got a hinge up and down on the head. By the way, I do also like the additional shading, which I didn't mention actually earlier. But I like the shading in the face that gives it the slight indication of stubble growing in. He has a ball joint, and you can see actually a visible secondary shirt underneath this one. It's only really when you hinge the joint back that you see this, but you've got the ball joint there. Universal joints on the arms, so they hinge outward all the way around. Bend at the elbow, as mentioned, and a rotation back and forth, really technically all the way around if you wanted to. Rotation in the hand, and hinge back and forth. Then when you get to the legs split out, as well as a forward and back. You got your typical bend in the lower leg, as well as a rotation back and forth. And once again, very, very limited posability when it comes to the feet. It's actually such a shame because the figure is so good, I wish that you could have actually had the means to properly stand. And yet, try as I might, unless I maybe like crunch his torso forward, yeah, he just doesn't seem to stand properly. Plant his feet a little bit better. Yeah, not so much. So I think what I'll do is I'll bring back the display stand. Just going to attach his feet to the display stand, and at least then he won't have the embarrassing falling over while we're looking at the Xenomorph warrior. So we'll put Burke right there. top-notch figure. Hope we can get a Helen Hunt figure. It's very, very unlikely. Oh, my aspirations for wanting to get a Mad About You diorama set up in my house. Anyways, moving along, we have the Xenomorph Warrior, which actually does look a little strange for being a Xenomorph from Aliens, because of course you see the dome. Now, this actually is indicated on the side of the package rather than the front as the concept figure. The front of the package only says Xenomorph Warrior. It's not until you flip the packaging around, don't believe me, here's the packaging right here. The side of the package says concept figure, whereas the front only says Xenomorph Warrior. So here we have a Xenomorph, not quite what we ended up getting in Aliens, but a slight, very slight variation to what we got from the original Alien. I quite actually like the dome, and it's my preferred choice for an Alien rather than the visible scaled underneath. I quite like the dome myself. And I'm sure there are people that can speculate why one Alien has it that way and why other Aliens have it another way. I always seem to think that Aliens that were created inside controlled air controlled air situations where temperatures and stuff like that were regulated could develop the dome because it was it was protection for the alien, whereas outside aliens would have developed the more rigid domed heads. That was what I used to think when I was younger. I'm sure again many people will probably just think otherwise, but it's funny enough though that Alien Resurrection, Alien 3 of course, all inside all have the dome. The aliens from Aliens all had the more rigid domes, the more, for more harsher environments. At any rate though, I prefer the domed heads myself because I think it just looks nicer on the Alien personally. You've got still the open and closed mouth, and you have the inner jaw inside, which is always difficult to get. This one's actually a little easier than others. You have that jaw, the inner jaw that opens and, of course retracts outward. This back section here will still unpeg if you want to bring the neck further back. Again, really, a lot of the elements here seem very familiar. One of the other things that they incorporated for this particular figure too is a slight different coloring. Relying not so much on a very, very obvious brown or very obvious blue. They actually kind of went with a more moderately scaled back brown, giving us more from a distance, a more darker black looking alien than rather a more brown alien that we've seen sometimes before. Really nice sculpt in the torso, never disappointed by NECA's releases of these aliens, and this one is no different. Again, the fingers will vary. In this instance, you've got a very long 2 fingers and a thumb, or the equivalent of that on an alien. Here you've got the more closed fingers together. They have the posability in the 2 fingers like other releases we've seen before. The tubing stays relatively constant with that of the aliens. Really not much different here than what we saw with the other regular aliens, other than really essentially the dome, which can be added to that. I really like the shading, the dark shading that they've incorporated around the sides, leaving the top kind of still slightly translucent, where you can make out the rigid bone structure of the skull inside. Posability on the Xenomorph Warrior, his head rotates back and forth. Of course, this part here is always difficult to get out, but you can pull that out, and the head can actually arch a little further back. You do have to be careful though, because these little strands that attach the lower mouth attach to the back here. So you don't want to be moving that too much, just in case you pull it and pop it by mistake. Let me just go ahead and replace that back. There we go, just plugs right into place. You've got universal joints. Got your universal joints. Get your universal joints here on the shoulders. Double hinge on the elbow. There's a hinge there and a hinge there. That gives us 2 hinges. That's a double hinge for you, ladies and gentlemen. You got a rotation in the hand as well as a hinge back and forth individually. Not quite individually, but 2 hinges on the 2 longer fingers. The thumb is not posable. Upper torso ball joint. Then again, you got your universal joints on the legs. Double hinges on the knee. You got your crunch, or not quite crunch, ankle pivot, as well as a forward and back on the feet. Articulation on 3 toes, while this toe is not posable. And of course, like every other alien from NECA, you get also your wireframe tail. That gives you some additional articulation as well. There's certain figures from certain properties that you never really think that a toy company will invest time and money into making. In this case, Carter J. Burke, one of my favorite characters from the Alien franchise, a slime bag, of course, one that fittingly deserved his fate, but it was a figure I never thought NECA would ever entertain the idea of making. Personally, being a Paul Reiser fan as well, I am thrilled that we finally get ourselves a Carter in plastic form. Unfortunately, though, articulation as it is on Burke, you simply just can't seem, or I can't seem to stand him on his own, and in this instance, and in instances of displaying him for future, I probably will have to rely on this display stand to get him to stand properly. So I like Burke, I like the sculpt of him, he looks exactly like he did from the movie, and he looks of course like Paul Reiser. Unfortunately, standing him can be a bit of an issue. With regards to the Xenomorph Warrior concept figure, on the other hand, even though this isn't technically the way it looks in the movie, of course relying more on a rigid dome rather than the smooth dome, I always like the design of this myself more so this is going to be my go-to, I think, for a Xenomorph Warrior, at least from the domed end of it. I've got enough rigid domes from the other Alien figure releases that if I really want to have a diorama display with more movie accurate aliens, I can always go back to those instead. This figure has some really great design aspects to it. Again, I really like the dome myself over the rigid top head that we saw from the Alien sequel. So really both figures are really great releases. I'm glad that NECA also didn't just release a regular Alien Warrior that we saw from Aliens to come included with Carter. The fact that they would have also thrown a little bit extra oomph into it by giving us a concept figure makes this all the more reason why you would want to add this one to your collection. Today, we were having a look at the new NECA release. This was the Aliens Carter J. Burke and the Xenomorph concept figure Warrior. If you guys haven't had a chance yet to subscribe to this channel, make sure you hit that little subscribe button down below. You'll never miss future videos. Speaking of videos, though, if you also would like to go back and check out some of my previous NECA reviews, I've got a playlist on this channel that you can check out and watch at your viewing pleasure. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you next time.